For the first portion of our time together, I'm going to present some from back here. I'm sorry to say that the remote is not working, so I'll be kind of tied to the desk for a little bit. But then for the second half of the class, I'm hoping to just sit down with you all and have a conversation about these topics and kind of different pieces that play into that. Before we start, I do actually want to revisit the description of this session that I think was printed. And I want to make a small amendment. So the description of the class says, music carries deep meaning for people and their faith stories. Worship music and various musical styles have often been points of contention and conflict between generations in the church. But how might we find new ways to engage with God and others through music that help us understand and love each other instead of building walls of division? How else can music play a role in intergenerational worship? Let's start a conversation about abundance, not scarcity, hope, not resignation, connection, not separation. And I want to slightly alter that last sentence, because I said I want to start a conversation about abundance and hope and connection. But the reality is that we still experience feelings of scarcity, fears, feeling hopeless at times. We do sometimes experience separation in our interactions with people and in our churches. So instead I want to say, rather than start a conversation about abundance, I want to say let's start a conversation towards abundance and hope and connection. That's our goal. But these other experiences where we do feel discouraged, or there are challenging stories from our own churches or ministries, those are valid and those are welcome as part of this conversation as well. So I want to clarify that. But to get us started off here, I want to think about a dynamic that we often experience with music, and that's when songs become memories. And I want to invite you to think about a song that is memorable to you. Maybe it was a favorite song of yours at some point in your life. It doesn't have to be a worship song, it could be a secular song. The one that I will share about is just something that was indicative of a certain season of your life, or reminds you of a person that you care about, or a significant experience that either that song reminds you of or it helped you through that. So when I think about a memorable song from a certain season of life, I think back to my teenage years when I was first kind of going through that adolescent phase of finding what music do I like, what do I not like, how do I kind of find my place and my fit among my peers, and the interests that we share and where we differ. And I remember, for my young homeschooled self, it was a little remarkable whenever I actually had some knowledge of popular culture. I was a little bit sheltered from some of those things. But I remember discovering the band Coldplay, and a song in particular of theirs called Speed of Sound. And I still can't quite put my finger on what about this song was meaningful to me. But I really do strongly associate that song with those teenage years. I associate it with driving my first car and listening to that song. I associate it with going with my youth group on a service trip to New Mexico and sharing this song with a close friend of mine and saying, hey, this is a really cool song, have you heard it? And his response was, yeah, wow, I really like that. And that was an interesting moment when I started to realize some of what music could mean in interactions with people, of me saying, this is something that I value, that I think has something good to it, and I want to share that with you. And in a sense, that was a bit of a vulnerable moment, because you might have said, no, that's a stupid song, why are you listening to that? And that would have hurt. But instead, that became something of, I guess, me finding a little bit of who I was in something that I discovered, chose for myself, and said, yeah, this is something that I like. And that was kind of a significant part of, I think, kind of my formation as someone growing from childhood into adulthood, of saying, I can make choices about the things that I like and value. And also, from for my 16-year-old self, nobody could tell me that that song was not about God. And I don't know why. And the reality is that I still have no idea what the lyrics are about. They're very abstract and have no particular specific significance that I'm aware of, as a lot of popular rock songs can be sometimes. It's very abstract and kind of amorphous. But I think it may have been something about the mystery of that, and the lyrics have invited us to think about things that we can't understand, things that are beyond our comprehension. And something about that music, the sound of it, the lyrics, the fact that I didn't know what it was about, kind of invited me to think about something beyond what the song was saying. So that's an example of how a song became significant for me. And there would be different songs that I would say for today in this season of my life. But that was significant and formative for me back then. So I want to invite you to think about what those songs may have been for you. Maybe there was a challenging season of life or an experience of loss or hardship when a song that you heard expressed something of what you were feeling and gave you kind of a touchstone to say, you know what, other people have felt this and I'm feeling this, and maybe I can experience this and get through this or communicate this to somebody else. Or maybe remember a moment when you felt compelled to share a song with somebody else. Either to say, this is something of me, there's something of me in this song, or I really think you could be encouraged. Or to say, I really think you could be encouraged and blessed by this song, whatever it might be. So, on that, and this just raises the question, how do songs become meaningful to us? And it is a curious question for me, what are the differences when those songs are secular or sacred? Because both can have meaning to us. And I think that points to the fact that music is very personal, and I was thinking about this reality yesterday and kind of writing down some of my thoughts. So I'll read a brief reflection about that, and then we'll continue in our conversation. So the music that people listen to, enjoy, and identify with is deeply personal. Finding ways to appreciate the music that people like is often received as finding ways to appreciate them. And finding ways to criticize or reject the music that people like is often received as finding ways to criticize or reject them. So we do need to develop discernment about what music is meaningful and helpful to honest confession, lament, thanksgiving, and praise, and overall to the goal of transformation into the likeness of Christ. However, we should also recognize that our discernment is always informed by our own biases, and our biases are not always Christ-like. Also, I think that our readiness to listen for good in unfamiliar music is often linked to our level of willingness to look for good in unfamiliar people, or our discomfort with those people. There are real challenges in building connections between generations, and I expect many of us could also share stories of wonderful experiences and meaningful mentoring relationships. Music is a part of the larger conversation that happens in churches between these generations. So I think we should look for ways for music to be a helpful part that fosters relationship and try to reduce its role as a divisive factor that fractures us into tribes. So as an example, if somebody critiques a song that I like or suggests, even now, having studied church music and gained some understanding of the issues at play and the challenges of choosing music for a service, it's hard for me not to take it personally. If I'm told that a song that I like has weak harmony or melody, it's easy for me to take that as a statement directed at my musical taste and ability. If someone complains that a song's lyrics are shallow or theologically inferior, when those lyrics have spoken powerfully to me in my spiritual life and my journey with God, then it's easy for me to take that as a dismissal of my relationship with God. This song did something for me, it was meaningful to me, I found God in it, so how can you say that it has no value? And I'm not saying that these responses are right, but I think they're real, and I think many of us can experience those things. I think it also can explain the strong reactions that we can encounter from our congregants to musical choices, and I think it also shows us the profound need for a caring and pastoral approach to dealing with conflict around music. So as someone who is studying music and pursuing music ministry and scholarship, people will attribute some degree of expertise or authority to me when it comes to music. And I may also be tempted to think of myself as having superior musical taste to others. I used to listen to that type of music, but now that I'm enlightened and know quality, I listen to this type of music. And I think this can really hinder our interactions with others. I found it important to appreciate, and by that I mean consciously choose to listen with openness and look for things that I like in music that people value, because the person is more important than the music. What I've discovered is that as I show people that I'm open to different kinds of music and can appreciate what they value and see good in the things that they see as good, those relationships open up. And it's not just that they feel more comfortable with me, I also let go of some of my pride and some other barriers that I may have in interacting with that person. Conversations flow more easily, I feel more at ease with that person, and I'm more inclined to try to understand the things about them that are difficult or confusing. Music is personal, and it's therefore about connection. So I suggest that appreciating the music that other people value is an important relational and pastoral practice, and we might even think of it as a spiritual discipline in humility and openness. So moving from this idea of the personal nature of music, I want to address some terminology. This class is supposedly about intergenerational worship, and some of you may be familiar with that term, and some of you may not. And I want to, so part of the reason that I'm here sharing with you today is earlier this year I had the opportunity to do some research on intergenerational worship in a class with Dr. Bradley, and particularly I'll get into the specifics of what that paper was about, but I had the opportunity to present that paper at a conference called Intergenerate, which is about intergenerational worship. Scholars and practitioners coming together to talk about how we can do this well. And one of the presenters there gave these three categories that I found really helpful in thinking about intergenerational worship. It's characterized by mutuality, and this means both parties are gaining or losing together. We're invested, and we are impacted by each other. It's also characterized by reciprocity. This means both parties are giving to and receiving from each other. It's not just one direction. And also equity. And this isn't about everyone being equal or the same per se, but it's about sharing. It means that there's fairness and respect. And these three qualities are important to an intergenerational approach to worship. And I think they also give us the distinction between intergenerational and another term that sometimes comes up, which is multi-generational worship. And people may use these interchangeably, but in conversations with people about these things, one of the things that has come up is that when we talk about a multi-generational worship service or approach to worship, it means that multiple generations are present and they're finding ways to coexist. But what people mean by the term intergenerational is that there's a kind of a further step beyond that of saying that each generation is influencing and being influenced by the others. There is that give and take where we're really engaging and not just kind of finding a lowest common denominator or a middle ground. So I want to kind of put some context for a bit of the paper that I'll be sharing. I'm not going to present the whole thing, but I just want to give some highlights from my research, and then we can move into kind of a more personal and practical conversation. Welcome. So I was given the topic of intergenerational worship and wanting to research this, and particularly I was interested in how the lyrics of our hymns and songs address different stages of life and the value that people of all ages bring to the church. And I realized that this was a very large task. So one of the things that I chose to do early on was to limit the scope to a pretty narrow view. So that is why the subtitle of the paper was Theologies of Childhood and Aging in 21st Century Community. So I narrowed the field just to basically hymns written in the past 2 decades. And if I were to look kind of further afield throughout the church's history, I'm sure there would be many more that if not being focused on this idea of intergenerational worship, which that conversation is relatively new, but people have been worshiping together with all ages for all of the church's history. So there would likely be more that would appear, but rather than trying to look at 100 hymns, I looked at 3. So that limit kind of helped that. And also I want to say that this idea of singing the stages of life together, or the idea of our hymn lyrics or song lyrics having a role in that, is really only one part of the larger conversation about intergenerational worship. So what I'm going to be sharing here is just one kind of way of approach to start thinking about and talking about intergenerational worship. And really my goal is to start a conversation and to think of new ideas and brainstorm new possibilities about how we can do this better and faithfully serve as ministers and as musicians. So, one quote that I found particularly meaningful in my research that I want to share is from Parker Palmer in his book, On the Brink of Everything, Grace, Gravity, and Getting Old. It says, "We, young and old together, hold the future in our hands. If our common life is to become more compassionate, creative, and just, it will take an intergenerational effort." I think it's really encouraging and convicting to me to hear someone like Parker Palmer, who is in the later stages of life and is writing this book reflecting on getting old and what faith looks like in the later stages of life, to say we need to be working on this together. We need people of all ages together in the church in worship for this thing called the body of Christ to function properly. Yes?
What was the name of the book?
On the Brink of Everything. I would recommend it. So in light of this concern for exploring what hymns and song lyrics can say about intergenerational worship, I wanted to see what are these hymns teaching our congregations about what it means to be human, what it means to be a child, what it means to be an adolescent, an adult, an older adult. What can we learn and share with each other about these different stages of life? So 3 hymns that I focused on. First is Lord of Our Growing Years by David Mowbray, and that's found in the Celebrating Grace hymnal. Another one is Strong, Gentle Children by Dan Damon, and that's in Worship and Rejoice. And the third one is God, We Spend a Lifetime Growing by Carolyn Winfrey Gillette, and that one I found in Songs of Grace, New Hymns for God and Neighbor. So I want to take a look at each of these 3 and look at the lyrics together, and then share some brief thoughts about each of them before we continue. We're good to... This is Lord of Our Growing Years. Lord of our growing years, with us from infancy, laughter and quick-dried tears, freshness and energy, your grace surrounds us all our days. For all your gifts we bring our praise. Lord of our strongest years, stretching our youthful powers, lovers and pioneers, when all the world seems ours, your grace surrounds us all our days. For all your gifts we bring our praise. Lord of our middle years, giver of steadfastness, courage that perseveres when there is small success, your grace surrounds us all our days. For all your gifts we bring our praise. Lord of our older years, steep though the road may be, rid us of foolish fears, bring us serenity. Your grace surrounds us all our days. For all your gifts we bring our praise. Lord of our closing years, always your promise stands. Hold us when death appears, safely within your hands. Your grace surrounds us all our days. For all your gifts we bring our praise. Now, I think it is meaningful and beautiful that each stage of life is named here, and not just named, but also given a blessing, and thanksgiving is expressed to God for the particular blessings of that season of life and the gifts that those people have to offer. Something that I also think is significant about this song is the reality that if we were to sing this song in a corporate setting, people would likely identify with one of the verses that they feel most closely represents their current season of life, and that's good and helpful, and can help us offer the concerns that we are dealing with presently to God and to give expression to that. Another thing that I think is helpful and meaningful about this song is that everybody present in the corporate worship gathering would also be singing the verses that can be attributed to other people in the congregation. So not only do we sing our own story, we sing the stories of the people around us, and we also hear other people singing our story and affirming the challenges and the blessings of our own season of life and our own experiences, and offering that to God for us. And I think that is something that, when we can do something like that in corporate worship, I think that opens the door to mutual understanding and relationship and engagement. To sing a song like this and then maybe be inspired afterwards to talk to somebody of a different age, of a different generation, and say, well, what did that mean to you? What does this look like in your life? So I think when the music itself and the lyrics of the songs that we sing can not be, and this is one of my frustrations in the conversation around intergenerational worship, is that sometimes it becomes kind of a zero-sum game mentality of these people like this music, these people like this music, something's got to give. We can't please everyone, so we're going to have to compromise. And I think there is value in that we are called to love each other sacrificially, and to have humility about our preferences. But I think we also need to recognize that these songs of various kinds do have really profound meaning to people, and it's not fair to them to just dismiss them out of hand. That goes for all kinds of music across the spectrum and that are meaningful to different generations. So to see a song, and I realized that the three songs that I chose here are hymns, and again, that was a question of focus. But to have lyrics that give an opportunity for the music itself to be a point of connection instead of division is something that's encouraging to me, and I think that we can use more of that. That's one of the things that one of the points I'm trying to make in this paper and in sharing this with other people is that there are examples of good opportunities and hymns and texts that do this, but we can also look for more and produce more. So the second song is Strong, Gentle Children by Dan Damon. Strong, gentle children, God made you beautiful, gave you the wisdom and power you need. Speak in the stillness all you are longing for. Live out your calling to love and to lead. Strong, hurting children, angry and terrified, open the secrets your life has concealed. Though you are wounded, know you are not to blame. Cry out your story till truth is revealed. Strong, knowing children, utter your cry aloud. Honor the wisdom God gave you at birth. Speak to your elders till they have heard your voice. Sing out your vision of healing on earth. And
where did you find that hymn?
That hymn is in Worship and Rejoice. And I can, let's see. They're the three with the hymnals for each. Yeah. Yes?
At some point will you share how you can access all these?
So I actually found all of these on hymnary.org, and I'm not sure, and some of these are in multiple hymnals. Yeah.
Our church uses one license,
Okay.
so we have, it's a fee, kind of like CCLI,
Gotcha.
only, but it's for hymns, so you have access to every hymn, almost every hymn and every hymnal.
Okay.
So we can use from the Catholic hymn, from Canadian, from Worship and Rejoice. But if people don't have access to all those, that's hymnary.org, but then if you want the license to do it as many times as you want, then
Okay.
one license.
Great.
.org
Yeah,
is-
thank you. Yeah. Yeah. But when I think about this song, as I was reading and researching more about different stages of life, and particularly theology about childhood and aging, I noticed that when I actually looked into the experiences of people who have worked with children significantly in the church and in their spiritual formation, children are capable of a lot more spiritually than we tend to give them credit for. There are stories of people encountering really profound moments with God and experiences of spiritual insight and depth with children that if we were to look at, for instance, developmental psychology, they shouldn't be capable of at that stage. We would say, oh, their brains haven't developed to be able to think in that way. But the reality is, God is working in their lives, and God is meeting them and encountering them. And they are having these experiences, they can encounter God's love. And they also have gifts, even at that age, that they can be a blessing to other people. So I think there's a lot of value in recognizing that together in our corporate worship. And I realize there are complicated questions in terms of how do we include children in our corporate worship, and different ministers and congregations do that differently. So I'm not prescribing anything here, but I think there's a lot to be learned from people of all ages, those who are engaged in ministry with children and those who aren't as directly, to recognize God is at work in their lives. And also that there are situations in which children do suffer. They have very real joys and experiences of God and things to offer us, but they have also been hurt. And it can be very challenging for children to be able to seek help and to express those things. So I think a song like this encourages me because it puts everybody in the frame of mind to recognize these are human beings made in the image of God, and they are loved by God and gifted by God. And we can respect them and call out the good that we see in them and appreciate them. So the last hymn that I want to share with you all is God, We Spend a Lifetime Growing. This is in New Hymns for God and Neighbor. God, we spend a lifetime growing, learning of your love and care, planting seeds you give for sowing, working for the fruit they'll bear. Now we honor faithful servants who, with joy, look back and see years of growing in your presence, lives of fruitful ministry. Thank you, Lord, for ones who teach us what has brought them to this place. May their faith-filled witness reach us. May we glimpse in them your grace. Strong in you, their strength uplifts us from our birth until life's end. Spirit-filled, they give us gifts as prophet, mentor, guide, and friend. Christ our Lord, you walk beside us, giving daily work to do. Years go by, and still you guide us as we seek to follow you. If our sight fails, weak hands tremble, minds forget the things we've known. Lord, we trust that you will remember, hold us close, and see us home. And I think many of us can recognize that on the one hand, if children are often not taken seriously in the church, as people grow older, sometimes they can be pushed to the margins as well. So I think there's a space and a need in our worship to acknowledge and express gratitude for the gifts that people who are growing older offer to all of us. And I think to sing something like this in a corporate service, and I recognize that in terms of actually programming this kind of music in a Sunday service, you're not going to have a whole service that includes all three of these most likely, or others like it. But it would be very appropriate on a certain Sunday to acknowledge the older members of a congregation who have served faithfully for years, or even to appreciate the wisdom and the testimony of older adults, even if they have come to faith later in life. Both categories of people have a whole lot to offer, and I think there's a lot to be said for giving voice and representing different kinds of people in our songs. It's one thing to engage in relationship with people in our church services, and it's another thing to acknowledge them corporately and to acknowledge them from the front, to offer that encouragement and affirmation and gratitude. So a brief reflection on singing the stages of life together. If we acknowledge the invaluable gifts that both young and old bring, we're right to consider how to include all in worship. The reality is we all need community, and that need is not limited by age. We need each other, people of all generations. So I'm suggesting that for our conversations around intergenerational worship to mature and become more fruitful, we need to dig deeper than the surface level of let's use this music because these people like it, and let's use this music because these people like it. Musical style is important, but we can't rely solely on that for building bridges across differences of age. We should use music from a variety of generations, but when we really think about it, we also realize that stylistic preferences aren't neatly divided based on when somebody was born. People of all ages like different kinds of music, and that's a reality that we see in our churches. So I want to suggest kind of another way that music can play a role in facilitating those connections. I think hymns like these and other songs can narrate and describe the experiences of diverse life stages, and that can offer encouragement and points of connection for people. So when we sing a hymn like Lord of Our Growing Years, we place ourselves in one of the verses, maybe remembering a previous time in our life, or imagining what life may be like in the future. But if we sing it together and sing the verses for other people as well, we might be moved towards curiosity, towards empathy, towards reaching out in relationship to people who are different from us. When we sing hymn like Strong, Gentle Children, suddenly a group of people who have often been forgotten as having spiritual capacity and agency are highlighted. People of all ages can be reminded of the gifts that children have to offer and the hurts that they may have endured. The church body is also reminded that children do have a voice, and that voice needs to be valued and protected. When we sing a hymn like God, We Spend a Lifetime Growing, the older members of our community, who are also often marginalized, are centered in our minds as we express gratitude for all that they have to offer. Our desire to learn from and value them is given corporate voice, which hopefully will inform the ministry of the church and lead to fruitful and mutually encouraging relationships with people of all ages. So I think these hymns and other hymns and songs like them can play a part in expressing the value of young and old. They might be able to foster connections that can help our intergenerational worship grow in meaningful relationships, not just in the songs we sing, but in the ways that we love people. They remind us that children have a capacity for love, experiences of God, and spiritual insight that can surprise and inspire wonder. The image of God is seen in their joy, their alternating dependence and exploration, and their God-given ability to embody their unique vocations in the present, not just the future. Therefore, we should engage them with the expectation that they are capable of profound experiences and revelations of God. Children deeply need to be both seen and heard, to be understood and to understand, to ask probing questions, and people of all ages need to see and hear God through relationship with children. Hymns and songs like these can also teach us that older adults are valuable and faithful members of our faith communities. They've contributed in significant ways over many years, but they're nonetheless often sidelined and even isolated. The image of God is seen in their wisdom, their faithfulness, and their capacity for relating to and encouraging others developed through a lifetime of experiences. We should cherish their expertise, seek out their stories, respect their input, and value their role and voice in the church of today, not just the church of the past. Our seasoned sisters and brothers in Christ are indispensable to the story of God's redeeming love at work in the world. They have a lifetime of skills and experiences to contribute and have seen and continue to deal with significant change in the world around them and even in the church. The reality is that all of us need to be seen, heard, and understood by those who are like us and by those who are unlike us. We need to share our faith and our struggles with people that we can connect with easily, and we also need to do that with people that it's more difficult, that we need to put more work into building those connections. So I would suggest that songs that express the diverse life experiences of believers of different ages can enrich our worship and foster intergenerational community. And they may not be the center of every worship service, they won't be, but we can benefit from having them in our repertoire. And one thing that I recognize is that while there are a few hymns that are being written that address this, there aren't very many modern worship songs that do, that I'm aware of. I'm aware of, there's a verse in 10,000 Reasons that talks about kind of aging or end of life in kind of a poetic way. On that day when my strength is failing, the end draws near, my time has come. Still my soul will sing your praise unending, 10,000 years and then forevermore. And that's beautiful. But it doesn't really do as much with addressing people of all ages. And also I'm aware of a song that I just came across recently, was reminded, Bio Love by Chrissy Noffels has a verse about children being hope for justice, and that children will reach on after we are gone, and that they will be known by their love. So there are small examples, but I would suggest that there's room for contemporary songwriters to do more in this area. I can imagine a song, for instance, about the life of Jesus that maybe has a verse about his childhood and what that might have been like. Maybe something like that could start a conversation between children and their parents. What is it like to be a kid, and how can you honor God in that? Or maybe a song about community and caring for people of different ages, people maybe dealing with health problems or growing old, that maybe a song like that could inform conversations and give some direction or impetus to ministry and relationships with people. So there's more opportunities for that to happen. But I also realize, I want to say again, that this conversation about these particular hymns is really just a small piece of a much larger conversation. So there is this broader conversation about corporate worship as a whole that needs to happen, that includes and considers all ages, and I would say that is a job of the entire church staff, not just the musicians and the music ministers. There's more than just choosing songs that needs to happen here. And as we move into kind of a more informal conversation, while this is about music, this is also about relationships, and we're going to find ourselves moving back and forth between both of those things. And that's because music is about connection and ministry is about relationships, and because of that, music ministry is about relationships too. And the ways that we relate to people will affect and inform the ways that we engage with music. One of the things that I've noticed is that, and I mentioned this before, but as I stop telling my friends things like, no, I don't really like that music all that much, I don't think it's very good. If I stop saying that and instead listen to music with them and start to have conversations about, why do you like this? What do you think is good about it? Those friendships just improve. They just do. And I think there's room for that to happen in all kinds of conversations. And also the more that we know people and have engaged meaningfully with them, the more open we are to that. So, at this point, I've done enough talking and standing up here, so I want to join you all and hear some of your perspectives and stories and experiences in ministry and your churches, and just ask some questions and have some discussion about how we can do this. So to start off, I think it might be easy to kind of get into this conversation. I'm aware that the Alleluia conference and worship lab are happening kind of side by side, and we mentioned how there's some points of overlap. People from worship lab have come and joined us here in our worship gatherings, which has been great to have them here. And I think there's also a concert later today, or a worship gathering that they will be leading, that people are invited to attend. But what is it like having Alleluia and worship lab here at the same time? Like, what is that something that you're very aware of? Do you think about that much? Do they seem like similar or different events? I'm just curious about some of your thoughts.
For me, it's separated. I mean, we're not around hearing what they're doing, we just see a result.
Okay, yeah.
It's not really integrated.
Mm-hmm.
That's the first time attendee. I didn't even know about worship lab until it was mentioned, and then I was like, oh, those must be the new ones. So yeah, I was oblivious to it.
I met one of the youth in worship time. That's one of the times when we are kind of coming together, and I got to talk to them a little about what they're doing. But it would be nice somehow if it was a little more integrated and we knew more about what each other was doing. But that's an opportunity when you do see them like in the worship setting or something like that, to reach out and talk to one of them and find out what's going on, what they're doing here.
I have a son that's in worship lab, and so I hear from him in terms of how it's going, and is he enjoying it. And a big key overlap that I think is going on is they get to experience Ken Meadman like we do, and he's just unreal to me. But anyway, the fact that one, my son can come over and experience that with us. They get to experience a new feeling of worship like we do, okay? And then for him to be able to spend an evening, Ken that is, with them and share experiences. I think that is a good tie together for this us versus them kind of thing. I appreciated that, and that's happened. He's enjoyed it.
So, as we talked about kind of these parallel but slightly overlapping aspects of Alleluia and Worship Lab, I kind of want to bring it back to our own churches and congregations and begin to think about what that dynamic looks like and how we navigate that. So one question that I'd be curious to hear your thoughts about, what opportunities do people of various ages have to listen to music, to talk about music, or to make music together? Maybe that's on Sunday mornings, maybe that's in other events in the lives of our churches, or maybe that's in things happening in the broader community. Are people of different ages engaging music together at all? Do they know what kind of music each other like? Do they make music together? Are they a part of organizations that do that? Are there kind of opportunities for building relationship through music across kind of age differences that you're aware of or have experienced?
So I serve at, sorry, I don't know if I interrupted someone, but I serve at First Baptist Waco as a music ministry intern, and we started this ensemble this past year called The Bridge, and it's an intergenerational, like worship experience, I guess. And so it's 4th grade to anywhere, I guess. And it's been a really great experience. I kind of doubted it at first, but people kept showing up, and it was just the way we do it. It's like 15 minutes before choir rehearsal on Wednesdays. The youth will be there for their activities anyway, so they'll just come. Those 15 minutes, we'll sing through a couple songs and lead in worship about once a month. And it's been a really, really cool thing to see the way everyone's able to interact and build those relationships.
How old are the oldest people?
What?
How old are the oldest people? You said 4th grade to?
I don't know how old, probably like in their 80s.
Oh,
Yeah.
really?
That's great.
I was sitting here thinking about, some of what you were saying, and I sometimes, maybe it's my judgmental side, but, I've got several things going through my head here, sorry. We're just automatically locking them in, these youth need to be over there at worship lab. And that frustrates me, because I think we're putting them and we're telling them as their elders, we realize this is where you want to be, this is where you need to be, instead of, where would you like to be? And where is the discussion in church? Why couldn't one of your older Sunday school groups and your high schoolers get together, have a Sunday school discussion? Why couldn't you do in your bridge, I wrote that down, I thought, oh, that's a cool idea. Let's take, without ever playing the music, let's take this text and let's take this text and let's talk about it as this intergenerational group and what's affecting you in these texts. And then let's play the music and then let's see what happens. And maybe through that combined appreciation for, maybe a hymn, an old hymn out of the book, or I run into this where if I bought, so there's a lot of the contemporary pieces now that look like actual anthems that your chancel choir can sing in a complete arrangement. I have so many people who go, oh, well, that's not really contemporary or whatever, and just with those conversations then helping to bridge that gap or helping everyone realize that this is an avenue for us to do this together and stuff. So I don't know if that helps at all, but those are all going through my head.
Yeah, I'm struck by the thought that you mentioned kind of assuming where the youth want to be or telling them this is where you want to be. I think we do that with all kinds of things. We have this expectation and then it becomes kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy. And I wonder, how many times do people of whatever age not share the music that they love with people who are different from them because they assume they don't like that?
I mean, a prime example is, I direct the youth choir in a church prior to this. And at the end of the year, I would ask those who were about to graduate out, what would you like to sing as one of our final things? And it was, Rudders for the Beauty of Here. They wanted to do that. And here's this, this girl was actually 16 and was leaving. And she wouldn't look at her and think that, she was, like our kids now that have gone through voice lessons and all this kind of stuff. And she's just an ordinary kid. She goes, I love that piece. I want to do it. So, and the assumption was that it would have been something, off the radio.
At my church, did you raise your hand?
Is that it?
Did you? At my church, everybody's separated out. So there's a children's service, there's a youth service, and then there's the adults. And the only opportunity that we ever have to be together is when I've programmed something. And we do a lot of multi-generational stuff. So when I started there, we started off with Generation Hymns Project by Tommy Walker. And the children and the youth had never heard any of the hymns. And we did that as a big night of worship. And so now I've gotten to the point to where we do Christmas together, the youth lead with the adults in service, but I have to take them out of their service to do that, their service. So it's challenging where I am because they want to be in there and the adults feed into them when we're learning music together and we have conversation, we pray together in groups and we're able to do lots of stuff. We still call it multi-generational, but I feel like it sounds very much what you're talking about. But our church is also evangelical, so It's just, we exist in the contemporary Christian music world. And so bringing in hymns is also kind of crazy. So, but anyway, it's challenging because I'm having to take them away from something in order to include them in something else. But otherwise, they just don't get that opportunity, and it's a little frustrating. Yeah.
What was the name of that hymn project you said?
Generation Hymns Project by Tommy Walker. It's contemporary.
Can I play off of something that you started with? And I thought this was maybe where you were gonna elaborate. And this may just be so obvious to everybody else, but I think this is really kind of an important thing to me. And let me preface it by just mentioning an experience I had last week. At our house, I've been in the decluttering mode, and our garage is atrocious. And we've had these shelves where we've had stuff for years, and there were a bunch of plant pots. And I think my wife has received these plants and things from her kindergarten kids over the years. Plants die, and then she keeps the pots, and they're just stacked up. And I've just been in a, hey, we gotta get rid of this stuff mode. And so I actually brought some in, and I was washing them out, just thought maybe we can give them to somebody. I just don't want to give them to them dirty. And I was washing this particular one, it had chips in it, and it's pink, and I just thought, I really ought to just throw this away. And I'm so glad I didn't, because my wife walked in and she said, oh, please be really careful with that one. She said, because that's the only thing I have left of my great-grandmother. I said, this? And she said, yeah. I said, I am so, and I didn't tell her I was gonna throw it away, but I was so glad that I heard that. And that leads me to something that just seems maybe obvious, and I just wish we could do this. And that is, if I knew that a particular song was really important to you, and I knew the story behind it, automatically that song becomes meaningful to me.
Yeah.
And I've had that in certain encounters with not only older people, but younger people. Like you said, they're teenagers. I know this in our church, for whom "It Is Well With My Soul" is their favorite song. And it's like, that is like 1,000 years old. And I love that song. That's one of my favorites. But I would never have predicted that a teen would say, oh, that's my favorite song. And it's probably because maybe it was sung at their grandmother's funeral, or because there's other experiences tied to that. I wish there was a way, and I think there is a way, but I wish we could do it, where we could find a way, maybe in our assembly, or we have it on maybe a video witness time, just maybe a 2-minute segment where an 80-year-old person comes on and says, this is why this song is important to me, or why, and then maybe a teen, maybe we have them on tape together, or we could have them, do it live or whatever, or you could have it in classes where you have the 18-year-olds and the 80-year-olds get together in class and they just talk songs. What's your favorite song? This is why. Not just this is my favorite song, but this is why. Those chipped vases, those chipped pots didn't become precious to us.
You had raised your hand earlier, was there?
Yeah, just a few things we do, and we don't do all of it. I don't think we do as well with the older generation as we do with the children, but since we're a medium-sized church, when the children come up for their children's moment, they go up and they're right, so the chancel area is here, and there's an area for them with activities that tie in with the sermon. And they stay in church the whole time.
Yep.
And they're visible. And learning this is what we do on Sundays, we worship. We also give them opportunities to play preludes, even if they're, just barely. We introduce the child up in front of the church, and they get to play Silent Night, and everyone loves to start getting them involved in the music leadership of the church. And I always bring in, a junior high bass player who can sort of play the roots, you know, get them involved in the music. We're not televised.
Yeah.
I mean, we can do those sort of little more down-home things. Yeah, there's a big, and I also have the luxury of a pastor who gives us a year's worth of sermons. I know. And then we have, and we coordinate with arts and culture, so we try to come up with, so this whole year is all gonna be about telling our stories. And we can bring in those little pots and why that means something to me. And I think it just adds a richness that is easy to miss.
Can I mention one other thing, and this this is again kind of a simple thing, and maybe it's on a whole different level, but we have an older lady, our church, who just come to our church with her sister. They just become parts of our church, and not long after they came, her sister passed away, and so they had their spot where they sat, but she sat there by herself on Sundays. And one of my daughters, and we have, in our church, we have, it's kind of the old people section. And we have the young married sitting kind of one spot, and, we have our little territories, and the youth have their spot. And one Sunday, I remember seeing it. I wondered what she was doing. Jo got up. She walked across the sanctuary, just sat next to that woman, and she sang. She worshipped with her physically next to her. I wonder if we don't segregate our church too much. And I think beyond the lyrics, beyond the content of our songs, sometimes the physical connection,
I think,
you know?
I think all of this, it goes beyond that. It goes, I think, to just those assumptions. Youth want to sit together. Older people are happier here without the younger families and the babies nearby.
Right.
They can hear better.
And sometimes when communion is happening, I notice that I can kind of look and I can see one person's here, one person's there. And maybe those are choices, and maybe I should tamper with that. But should anybody in her church receive or take communion, especially if you stay seated and you don't come forward, should anybody take communion by themselves? It just seems counterintuitive.
It's like we're promoting cliques, though.
Like it's an individual experience. We're in the building, for goodness sakes. We are the body.
Did you notice yesterday when Ken told us to look around, how we didn't? We're not even comfortable, making eye contact with people because even when we come in here, we're polite. We're just polite people that we've been taught to sit in our seats and wait quietly till, and I don't know how you change that, but just becoming aware of it might be something.
Yeah.
So start being rude, is that what you're saying?
No.
I don't know the history of the church, but it feels like, and I may be way off base here, but have we moved away from intergenerational worship?
Yeah.
It feels like because we're starting youth, services, and we're kind of catering to what we think is gonna be helpful, are we doing a disservice in that?
Yeah.
And that's why we're having to have these discussions now,
Yeah.
that we're robbing people of the opportunity to worship together and to experience each other in creating all these different Sunday school classes. I know we base a lot of our Sunday school classes off of age groups and things like that.
Yeah.
Like just in general, that we've kind of done it to ourselves, and now we're trying to figure out how to fix it. I don't know,
Yeah.
was it more intergenerational in the past? I mean, we all
Sure.
worship more corporately than we in the past with the children even,
Yes. Yeah, and some of that goes back to the church growth movement and kind of siloing different age groups and having graded children's ministries and youth ministries and then young adult, and then it just kind of escalated
Yeah,
from
we
there.
keep dividing.
Keep dividing,
Put
yeah.
people in their little bubbles.
So I think we've realized that there's a lot to talk about here, and I wish we had another hour to sit and talk, but we are out of time. I would encourage you all to keep talking to each other and keep learning from each other. There's a lot of really great resources and people here and connections that can be made. So hope that you can continue to do that as we go back to each of our churches and try to serve better. Thank you all.